Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks so much for your day. Pray that this day, we pray that you'll bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I had a lot of plans and hopes to do sort of like a year-end in review, and then reality intruded. So sometime between now and next December, I'll get to the 2024 in review. Pretty much it's going to be the same old, same old. A lot of things happening. So today I'm going to just focus on mainly Middle East, Turkey, that type of thing. I was going to go through King Charles' Christmas speech, but I thought that would be sort of destroy the season. You know, the advice I would give to him, if you don't want people saying that you're the Antichrist, then, you know, stop acting like it. And well, anyway. So we'll talk a little bit about Turkey today. And I have no idea how long this will be. You know, people ask me how many times I practice giving this before I give it. And the answer is, you see me standing, you that are here live, you see me standing up here finishing up my slides. So you know that there's no practice involved. This is just off the, prepared, controlled chaos, I guess is how I would describe my prep. And I spent a lot of time this week just reading. But I think the Turkey thing is pretty important. So we'll talk about that. And I'm not going to make reference to too much scriptures, but just understand that two concepts today. So when we read in Revelation chapter 6 about the seals that are opened, my view is that the seals open and they increase over time, but they peak some point during this last period of human history. So for example, the white horse going forth conquering and to conquer, that might peak, you know, towards the middle of this last period. But, and you notice I don't say 70th week, and I don't say tribulation period, because one, I don't think the term tribulation period is used. I know that it's acquired a meaning because everybody uses it. So everybody knows that it means the 70th week, it means 70 years and that type of thing. But if you use the term, then there's people that don't like that and they get upset and everybody disagrees on everything. But in any event, and so the effects of what these horses do, these horsemen, as they ride, increase over time. And I believe they peak towards the end of the period. Some people have a view that first horse does what the first horseman does, what the first horseman does, then the second horseman, then the third horseman. And once each horseman finishes, then the next one comes. And I don't think that that's correct. And I disagree with a lot of my friends who say that 1/4 of the world dies in the third or fourth seal. I just don't think that that's what the scripture says. But we'll see. You know, if you're talking about 1/4 of the world, I did a calculation on it, and it's like 900 people a second all over the world for like 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's an incredible, I'm just thinking of, that's why I always talk about the logistics. I don't even have my logistics slide here. Good grief. So a lot of things going on. So let's just look at some of these and we'll see. And again, some of this is not necessarily in order. Earlier this week, a U.S. plane got shot down over the Red Sea. The claim was that it was friendly fire. I'm not sure that works, that explanation works. It might have been the Houthis actually shot it down. And the Houthis have demonstrated some pretty good capabilities in terms of firing missiles. They've launched a couple hundred missiles and drones towards Israel. I think 22 have gotten through. There was one last week that appeared to be, it came in very, very quickly. Some people thought it was a hypersonic. Might have been a hypersonic. It then got shot down. There was a missile tech, and I'll talk about that later. So just understand that this whole thing in the Middle East, this whole region is just in a state of turmoil, and it doesn't seem to calm down from week to week. This is another area. This would go into the term or the category wars and rumors of wars. Niger slides into more violence after coup. So that means, listen, there's coups going on everywhere. There's political turmoil. In France, it looks like the government's going to probably fail, and they'll have to go to elections. The same thing is happening in Germany. England, I saw some reports this morning in the UK that if elections were held today, that Nigel Farage's party would pick up 167 Labour seats in Parliament. 167 seats of the Labour seats in Parliament, which is just an absolute stunning thing. And all over the world, people that don't like people on the right, they're like, what's happening? The world's falling apart. This is terrible. It's the apocalypse. And then people that are on the right saying, yeah, we're finally getting our way. And I think the thing that we need to keep in mind is that Jesus is the answer. We'll get some good things like here in the United States, assuming Trump takes office on January 20th. So what do we got? 22 days, 3 weeks and a day. Assuming he takes office on January 20th, we'll get some things that we like. But then there are some things that I'm not too thrilled about. The push for AI and that type of thing, and some of the things are developing there. By the way, reminder, we'll be doing a prophecy roundtable on technology and AI, Mark of the Beast technology, that type of thing, on January the 8th at 7 p.m. That's Wednesday night, January 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, Tom Hughes, and myself. Probably a couple hours, maybe 2.5. We'll see how it goes. But a lot of things to talk about. And I don't really have that much about AI in my talk today. I don't really have much of anything about AI today. So this is, and again, these are going to be just kind of random bouncing around. So here was a big article in the New York Times the other day. Iran's energy crisis hits dire point as industries are forced to shut down. So with all the other things that are going on with Iran, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those in just a moment. And this is Iran. This is Iran that has all this energy and oil and gas. And the problem is their infrastructure is being hit. They can't replace things that are falling apart. So they're spending a lot of time in Tehran and other places in the dark. They just don't have power all the time. And in their currency is doing very, very badly against the dollar. It reached an all-time low this week where you had something like 43,000 Iranian rials for $1 US. And it's just, it's fallen like 60-70% against the dollar in just the recent past. This was kind of an interesting speech. This is the president of Iran. He was given a speech the other day. And as he's given a speech, this is just what this tweet says. The energy crisis in Iran is so severe that President Masoud Pezeshkian doesn't understand why the lights are turned on during his speech. We consume more gas and electricity than Europe. Why turn on the lights here when there's sunlight? It's so hot here that I'm sweating. Why are they heating the place up so much? And they actually turn the lights off. Now, you can't really tell that much because the camera adjusts to pick up whatever light is there. But this is during a speech to the Iranian president. they're having trouble with power. And this has a big impact on society. I mean, we actually got a letter from AEP, an email from AEP, American Electric Power, the one that provides our electricity at our house, because we kept having these little power outages, like 1 or 2 seconds. And it's so annoying because everything shuts down. You got to reboot. If you're on the internet, you got to reboot your router. It's really inconvenient. How can you stand living without electricity for 2 seconds? But in these countries in the Middle East and elsewhere, they're living without power for days on end. Lebanon has had power problems forever. At least last year, the power company failed. I don't know if it's come back yet, but if you didn't have a private generator, you didn't have electricity in Lebanon. I'm sure the Hezbollah guys did until things happened. This is an interesting story. This is on the right. In Lebanon, southern Lebanon, Israel has gone in and they have found tens of thousands of weapons, missiles, rockets, that type of thing that they've confiscated. They had a video that they put out, the IDF put out, and it's absolutely incredible. And this is one of the problems that the Iranian proxies have had is they're losing, and they're losing badly. They're being destroyed. They're being dismantled. And so here's Hezbollah lost a lot of its weapons. And I remember doing some interviews with people in Israel back when all this was going to start. And they thought there would be 10, 15, 20,000 civilian deaths if Israel went into a war with Lebanon, with Hezbollah in Lebanon. There would be hundreds, if not thousands, of IDF soldiers that were killed. So far, I believe the total is about 60 in Lebanon. 60 is IDF soldiers and 30 or 40 civilians, if you include the 12 children killed up in Majul Shams. That's way below what everybody thought. And so what Israel's achieved in Lebanon has just been absolutely, it's stunning. It's an amazing thing that they've done. Let's see here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this too, but so now we have the rebel leaders in charge of Syria. And the question is, on a big picture, how's it going? And the answer is, the guy that's in charge, this Al-Jilani, and he's adopted a new name. He remakes himself every few years. He was part of Al-Qaeda, he was part of ISIS, he was part of Al-Nusra. There was a $10 million bounty on his head from the United States government, which has now been withdrawn and removed from the website. And so he's running around and, he's wearing suits, he's looking great. He's used to have a longer beard. He's cutting his beard back. I told somebody once, I said, it looks like he's just one visit to Assad's old barber chair from looking like Zelensky, with a neatly trimmed beard. And so a lot of people were wondering, what's going to happen in Syria? There are already reports, and if you want to see them, you can go dig for them. I'm not going to play them for you. In areas that were controlled by the Assad military, they are going in and they are executing on the street, trying and executing on the street members of Assad's military. This guy's doing the public relations thing, saying, we don't want that, we want that, we want to live in peace, we want to bring everybody in. But there are people that are attacking Christians in some places, but then he comes out and says, no, if you attack Christians, we're going to arrest you. And he's done that. But the question is, can you believe him? That's, I think, the big question. And I think nobody really thinks that you can believe him. by the way, Biden commuted 37 death sentences. What's he going to do in the next? There were 40 people on death row in the federal prison system. 3 of them were so bad that even Biden couldn't commute their sentences. So what he did was he changed them from death sentences to life without parole. And some of these guys were pretty nasty killers, but that's his vision of justice, and it's probably a good reason why he wasn't reelected. Although somebody noted the other day that, he's only been elected to presidency once, he can still run in 2028. So it would be, I think, 86 or something like that. So I'm not sure that he's going to do this. And I'll talk more about this as we go down the road, but the Chinese economy is really in the tank. And that's scary because when countries go into the tank economically like that, what do leaders of the country do a lot of times is they take the country to war to get them out. I was reviewing a video this morning, a series of videos of Chinese ghost cities. They have these cities, they built like a replica of London, Paris, Manhattan, and some other big city, and they're all empty. There's no cars, there's no people. There are places in one city where they demolished 21 skyscrapers because there's nobody to live in them, because the Chinese population is falling. And when you look at some of the numbers, there's a demographics channel on Telegram that I follow. The numbers are shocking. So, I mean, they're saying, and I always say this, doesn't mean I think we'll be around here in I know I won't be around here in 2100. That's what I can almost guarantee that. I don't think there's enough AI and DNA modifications to be done to make me get another 75 years. But in 2100, projections are that the population of China, which is about it's fallen under 1.4 billion. They're losing like 9-10 million of people a year in population. That's a lot of people. By 2021, they're projected to have 400 million people. They will lose 1 billion people. What does that do to society, particularly when the people that are alive are aging and there aren't people to support them? What are they going to do? So that's what a lot of people in the AI community are saying, well, we'll just make robots to do the stuff to help people out that need help. But their economy is really in the tank badly. In fact, I think their GDP, which was above the U.S., has now fallen below the U.S. And they're making a lot of claims about Taiwan and that type of thing. This is a troubling story. Pakistan has developed a missile capable of hitting the United States. And people say, well, what's the big deal? It's a missile. We'll take care of it. But Pakistan is one of the nuclear powers on the planet. They developed a thing called the Islamic bomb. And they're actually in a war right now, a pretty hot war with artillery and troops and aircraft and that type of thing with Afghanistan. So Muslim countries fighting Muslim countries, which seems to happen with a lot of regularity. Oh, here's the article I was going to say. So they're trying to get people to have more children in China. But the way Chinese society has been structured, it makes it very difficult for them to have, people want to have children. In rural China, the parents have been forced to move to the cities, but they don't let the children come to the cities. So the children and the parents are kept apart, and the parents are going like, why should we have children if we can't be with our children? And so the next generation coming up sees what's happening, and they're saying, well, we're not going to have children if that's the way it's going to be. And so so even though they've tried to get rid of the one-child policy and those sort of thing, this problem that they have is irreversible. It will not be reversed. And it's happening in China. It's happening in Europe. It might even happen to the United States. We're sort of teetering on the brink. It's not happening in Africa. It's not happening in Israel. But it's even starting to happen in Muslim countries because as they get more prosperous economically, they have fewer children. And so this population, the world has never had this happen before, absent periods of time in human history when there have been a plague or something like that that's wiped out a lot of the population. And it's hard to people that specialize in demographics, they're wondering, like, they don't even know how to explain it because it's something that's never really happened before. They don't have a historical precedent to look at. And a lot of people, they won't talk about it. Because what are you going to do when you have older people need more health care? Bodies wear out. Trust me. I know this from personal experience. But what do you do when there's nobody around to help support you? And the answer is we don't know. Now, some countries like Canada are putting in place these programs to do euthanasia to help people die. And the problem that they're finding is that the people in charge of those programs are recommending more and more seemingly normal people for people who should be able to end it. I saw a story today of a person who had an 8 or 9-year-old child. The child, they said, your child is going to die. We want to harvest his organs. They were making preparation for that. And the father, I think he's from around Montreal, he said, no way. Took his kid to New Orleans. A year later, the kid's fine. And he's wondering, like, what was wrong with the people in Canada that were so quick to want to have my child die and harvest his organs to give to other people? And in a world that, in a world where, you have abortion on demand and that type of thing, what do you expect? What do you expect is going to happen? So here we go. So let's look at the Middle East. I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, like, I don't know if I can go overtime today. And my wife's going, good, about time you didn't. So this is the Houthis. And so they launched this missile into Israel. They've done about 5 this past week. And when they do it, the missiles are coming in fast and they don't know where they're going to land. So maybe 2 million people in Israel have to go into bomb shelters. And I saw a video of one guy. He's like, this is the 5th time this week I've been woken up in the middle of the night, have to go to the bomb shelter. Somebody do something, just go take these people out. They're not civilized, they're pirates. And what do we do with pirates? We need to do with them. So here you go. Yemeni missile sends millions of settlers to shelters. These are Iranian newspapers. And you see, they call people in Israel settlers. They don't call them Israelis or Jews or Israeli citizens or anything like that. And then this is the Houthi sign. This is their slogan. It's Allah is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory Islam. That's what they talk about all the time. I'll skip this. That's Syria demographics. This has been something that's been kind of troubling over the last 48 hours. 3, I believe, well, no, one was an Embraer Air. That was a plane that was hit by a Russian anti-aircraft defenses. That was an Azerbaijani jet. It crashed. Russia would not let it land in Russia. They made it fly across the Caspian Sea. It crash landed in Azerbaijan. And I think I don't know, there were 77 people on board. I think 38 were killed, 29 survived. Then there was a crash of I think it was a 737 crashed in Seoul, South Korea. 188 people were killed. You can watch the videos of that online. Then there was another one that went off the runway in one of the Scandinavian countries. I don't think anybody was killed in that one, but there have been like 3 major plane crashes in the last 48 hours, which is pretty unusual. And people are wondering what's going on. Russia, by the way, has come out and apologized for this after being avoiding the subject for a number of days. They've come out and said, yeah, we did it, and we apologize. So here's the Houthi attack on Israel the other day. It appears that the one yesterday, the THAAD missile system that the United States is manning in Israel, was able to take it down, but not before everybody had to get out of bed and go to their bomb shelters. Israel, in retaliation, launched massive strikes on Yemen. They bombed the airport, they bombed power plants, they bombed bases, that type of thing. There are about 100 Israeli jets involved in that operation, done very successfully. So this is just an example of the way the news has gone this week in the Middle East. This is just a 2-page spread from the Wall Street Journal on Friday. One is Israel strikes airport and power stations in Yemen. Deadly ambush and protest challenge new Syrian leaders. Villages in Syria bristle at Israeli incursions. So as you can see, everywhere you look, there's tension. So Israel has gone into part of Syria. It's a very narrow strip of land. You'll see all the anti-Israel channels like Israel's going to take over all of Syria. Israel's not going to take over all of Syria. They don't have the military force to manage that. They have enough trouble with Judea and Samaria. They have enough trouble with Gaza. They have enough trouble with Lebanon. They have enough trouble with a little bit of Syria. They're not going to, I just don't see them taking over the entire Middle East. And I know I have friends who think that they're going to take over a lot of land. I just don't see that happening unless they, quadruple the size of their military, which they don't have enough people to do that. This other story up here, this Israelis see a chance to remake the Middle East. This is kind of a stunning development. Because, remember, we're going to do the normalization agreements with Saudi Arabia. Everybody went to the UN. Netanyahu stood there and said, we're going to have a new Middle East. Interviews were done by Mohammed bin Salman back in September of 2023. We're going to have a new Middle East. We're going to reach a normalization agreement. And then October 7th, everything changed. Israel was at war, it was attacked, it was invaded. Then it was subject to missile barrages and rocket barrages from Hezbollah in the north. But Israel hung in there, and they've had stunning victories over the last year, 440 some days now. And the Middle East has been changed. I sort of put this graphic together. This is sort of what Iran looks like now to a lot of people in the world. It's shrunk down to size. Iran was causing a lot of problems everywhere. They were using their proxies. Here's a speech that the Ayatollah Khamenei gave the other day. And he said, listen, they say we need proxies. We don't need proxies. If we need to act, we'll act on our own. Now, what's the real translation of that? They took out all of our proxies, so now we have to act on our own. I mean, this guy is a propagandist, if nothing else. They go, everybody was just helping us out because we share a common faith and that type of thing. That's just a bunch of nonsense. Iran was paying them, and they failed, largely failed. Yemen's still causing some problems. But look at a little bit of what this article says. It won't be an easy feat to pull off, especially as public opinion across the Arab world, this is the article from the Wall Street Journal, has soured on Israel because of the Gaza war. But with the eyes focused on the horrors emerging from the wreckage of the Assad regime and a Gaza ceasefire potentially on the horizon, Israel might be in a position to repair its international image and diplomatic standing. And I would say there's been a change in the government in the United States. Current and former Israeli officials are pushing for aggressive steps to build an Israeli, American, and moderate Arab alliance that includes Saudi Arabia and is aimed at checking Iran's influence. So in other words, despite all the problems over the last 440 some days, they're thinking that they're going to be able to go back to what it was with entering into these normalization agreements with Arab countries that were disrupted by October 7th. The re-election of Donald Trump, who confronted Iran in his first term and is returning to the presidency next month, has raised hopes for such an alliance, said Golov. And Israel's done an amazing job, not that they were really that involved, but Syria fell. Israel then took advantage of that, and they went in and they did, I think, 480 some bombing missions, and they took out virtually all of the Syrian military hardware and infrastructure that had been left behind after the Assad regime fell. Why? Because they don't trust the people that are in charge now in Syria. They're afraid they're going to come after them. Then there was, they took out Hezbollah, and they also they've done a great job with Hamas. As part of this thing, this is this explosion that took place in Tartus, and you can see it was a massive explosion. Some people suggest that it was nuclear. It's not a nuclear explosion. Believe me, if it was a nuclear explosion, you wouldn't hear the end of it. But they hit a weapons store and everything went off. Israel has also been able to construct the sort of white crescent and open air corridor. When they went into Syria, they took out, Syria had some of the best air defenses on the planet. They had Russian S-300s, maybe some S-400s. Israel took them all out. Israel's taken out the air defenses in Saudi Arabia. They've taken some of the air defenses out in Iraq. So now Israel has a very open corridor. A lot of jets are able to avoid air defenses because of their speed and maneuverability. But tankers, which Israel needs refueling tankers to get from Israel to Syria and back, it doesn't really help if your plane runs out of gas in Iran. You don't want to, that's not a good look. But aircraft tankers are they're sitting ducks. They're not fast flying planes. They're not maneuverable, and they're full of fuel. So if you hit them, it's a big boom. But Israel's been able to take that out. So now the question is, what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks before Trump takes office? Is Israel going to do something to attack nuclear installations in Iran? Iran has said they're going to ramp up their process. At the same time that's going on, and I'll sort of talk about this over the rest of the slides here, is that everybody's seeing a collision coming between Israel and Turkey. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal. But now these two American allies whose already poisoned relations have been strained to the breaking point since the war in Gaza began last year, are on a collision course of their own in Syria and beyond. Managing this rivalry is likely to become a priority for the incoming Trump administration, adding to the pressure of the network of America's alliances in Europe and the Middle East. at the same time all of this is going on, the one thing I've noticed, and maybe it's just, I don't know if I get more of this in my feed on social media because I actually stop and look at it. So then, well, they say you must like that. So he stopped and looked at that. So we'll send more to him. The anti-Semitism that I've seen out there is just absolutely stunning. I mean, it's shocking to me, and it's coming from all sides of the political spectrum. The article, Turkish officials want the new Syria to be a success so that Turkey can own it, and they feel that the Israelis might ruin everything. So the director of a Turkey program at the Middle East Institute. And it is a problem. So let's look a little bit at this. So Erdogan he's been very clever. I'm going to replay some of the things I played last week. He went to the legislature in Turkey the other day, and he gave a speech, and he said, listen, essentially said, this is our moment. He then said, listen, you Kurds in Syria, if you mess around and you think that this is your moment, essentially we'll bury you in Syria. And there's attacks going on between the Kurds and Syrian forces up there. Somebody put up this editorial cartoon. The Kurds are growing up out of the ground and getting Erdogan, who's moving into the Middle East. Now, Jonathan Spire has a great article at the Jerusalem Post. I'll reference this quite a bit over the next few slides. Assessing Turkish intentions. What does Erdogan want? Many years ago, my friend Chuck Missler, I was at dinner with him. I said, what should I watch for? This is like 15, 16 years ago. He said, watch Turkey. So I've watched Turkey ever since. And Erdogan has been very clever. He's Muslim Brotherhood. He wants to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. He wants to become the new sultan in charge of everything, in charge of Israel, in charge of Jerusalem. You'll see some things here. And so Jonathan Spire, who's an expert on Syria, says, okay, look, what's happened in Syria and how do we assess his intentions? Amid the euphoria following the toppling of the Assad regime in Damascus, the situation facing Syria's non-Arab and non-Sunni Muslim minorities has been largely ignored. But even as the global media focuses on Damascus and speculates regarding the future intentions of the new power brokers in another part of Syria, the war is not over and the clashes are ongoing. The area in question is Syria's northeast, and combatant sides are the US-aligned, Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces and the Turkish-supported Sunni Islamist Syrian National Army. And it gets very difficult to remember all the different alphabet soups. So the Syrian Democratic Forces would be in the yellow. They're Kurdish. Erdogan doesn't like the Kurds. He thinks all the Kurds are terrorists. And someday we'll have to go and do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the Kurdish issue. The Kurds are about 40 million people. They're the largest ethnic group on the planet that doesn't have their own country. And so people say, well, if the 7 million Palestinian Arabs, which have been made up over the last 60 years, if they should have their own country, what about the 40 million Kurds? What's the reason why they don't have their own country? And when this area was divided up back in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Kurds just got split into like 5 different groups. And so a lot of what's happened in the Middle East in that area, they have oil. That's one thing that they have going for them. But Iraq has attacked them, Syria's attacked them, Turkey's attacked them, Iran has attacked them. They are an oppressed people. And as a result of that, they've developed fighting force. But I saw video this week of a clash between the Turkey-backed Syrian forces had captured a couple of Kurdish soldiers, females, and they just shot them in the head. And it's pretty brutal. So that's what's going on in northeast Syria. Most notably, Spire says, and perhaps insufficiently understood, is at the ending of a 61 years, this is the important part of his article, is that the ending of 61 years of Ba'ath Party rule in Syria is above all the triumph of one man. That man is not Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or al-Jilani, the leader of the rebels in Syria. Though he is set to emerge as Syria's new president, the man in question is Turkish President Erdogan. And I think it's pretty clear that he's behind this. Erdogan's decision to refuse to cede a small corner of the northwest Syria to the Assad regime enabled the slow growth of forces that would eventually destroy Assad. For half a decade, this decision appeared inexplicable. Everyone else had long moved on from the Syrian civil war, assuming it was over. And if you remember, one of the areas of unrest was in southern Syria. And if you remember the images of them taking the rebels from that area, Assad and Russia, and putting them on buses and shipping them up the north to Idlib. This is what they do with, this is what the Babylonians did, the Assyrians did with groups that they conquered back in the time before Christ. They would take the people from their land and move them someplace else. Because once you've removed the people from the land and their familiar, their familiar geography and everything, they become easier to control. So what Syria did was, okay, we'll take you from southern Syria and we'll move you all the way up to Idlib. Turkey said Erdogan is, if nothing, he's an opportunist. And he saw this, he goes, okay, those people will be reeling, they'll be easy to manipulate. So I'm going to move in there and I'm going to help them build a rebel force to take down the Assad regime. The Erdogans, by the way, and Assad family used to vacation together, but then things went south. So everybody says, so Jonathan Spire is right. Nobody could figure out why was this done? But what everybody missed was why it was important, and everybody seemed to have missed it. The Russians, sometimes shrewd and patient strategists on this occasion, walked into a Turkish trap, taking their Syrian client regime along with them. In their strategy of reconciliation rather than outright conquest of Syrian rebel-held areas, they got around the problem of the most hardcore determined insurgents by including an element in reconciliation agreements that allowed these men to keep their weapons and make their way to the Turkish guaranteed enclave in the northwest of the country. So they kept their weapons, they went up there, and Assad goes, hey, look, we got a ready-made army. Erdogan goes, we got a ready-made army here that I can use. But it should be remembered that in northwest Syrian enclave, the Turks allowed the incubation of not one, but two Sunni Islamist armies and authorities. The first of these, HTS and the Syrian Salvation Government, is the force that marched to Damascus and took power there this year. So they started in Idlib, they increased the area, and then eventually, once they had enough control, they moved down and took on Damascus. And people who are watching this, like President Trump, say, listen, Turkey is involved. Turkey is in charge of this. Turkey's in power. Here's what he said at his news conference on December 16th.
Turkey is a major force.
Whoops.
By the way, and Erdogan is somebody I got to...
Hang on here. Okay, here we go.
Turkey is a major force, by the way, and Erdogan is somebody I got along with great, but he has a major military force, and his has not been worn out with war. It hasn't been worn out with all of the other things. I mean, he's built a very strong, powerful army. Now we have 900. They put some back, but 900, if you're talking about two, now one of the sides has been essentially wiped out, but nobody knows who the other side is, but I do. You know who it is? Turkey. Okay? Turkey's the one behind it. He's a very smart guy. They've wanted it for thousands of years, and he got it. And those people that went in are controlled by Turkey. And that's okay. It's another way to fight. But no, I don't think that I want to have our soldiers killed. But I don't think that will happen now anyway, because the one side's been decimated. Well, nobody knows what the final outcome is going to be in the region. You know, nobody knows who really the final. I believe it's Turkey, and I think Turkey is very smart. He's a very smart guy, and he's very tough. But Turkey did an unfriendly takeover without a lot of lives being lost.
I like the way I kind of laugh when I hear him describe things like, oh yeah, I got along great with him. You know, he's a tyrant, he's Muslim Brotherhood, but I got along great with him. So I'm redoing my Turkey graphics. Here's my new Turkish chess piece. And then I have my the deck of cards called the Opportunist, the Essential Caliphate House of Cards Toolkit. And you see there's Erdogan as the Sultan, and he's controlling Al-Jilani. So I try to get all the different elements, I think, of everything that's important in that thing. But understand that Turkey is on the march. Their economy is in bad shape, but Erdogan is an opportunist. When he saw an opportunity to cause problems with Israel back, when was that, 2008, 2009, when they sent that ship over to try to break the blockade of Gaza, he took advantage of that, and he's going to take advantage of this. So here he was giving a speech last week, and he said, Turkey is greater than Turkey itself. This was on December 18th, at one of his party meetings. As a nation, we cannot limit our vision to 782,000 square kilometers. Those who ask, what is Turkey doing in Libya, Syria, or Somalia, may fail to comprehend this vision and mission. So they're involved in Libya. They've tried to, they've blocked Israel from transporting its gas through pipelines to Europe. Because why do they want to do that? Because he wants the pipelines to be built through Syria and Turkey to go to Europe. He wants the Russian pipelines to come through Turkey to go to Europe. Because what does he just doesn't let it pass for nothing. He charges a transmission fee. And it's great because he doesn't have to drill for the gas. He doesn't have to maintain the equipment or anything. He just has to help maintain the pipelines, which is probably the least expensive part of the whole process, but he gets money off of it. And this is a way that he controls power. And then if he gets mad at somebody, he'll just shut off the pipeline. If he doesn't get what he wants from Russia, he'll shut off Russia's pipeline. I think, by the way, the agreement between Ukraine and Russia for Russian gas to go through Ukrainian pipelines expires in a couple days. And because they've still been transmitting gas through the pipelines, even though they're at war, but I think that's going to come to an end. So he says, listen, we're not just Turkey. We've got a much bigger vision. So they're down in Libya, they're in Sudan, they're in Somalia. And when you look at the configuration of countries in the Ezekiel 38 prophecy alignment, clearly Turkey's involved. Meshach, Tubal, Togarmah, that's all part of Turkey. That's when Ezekiel saw that vision, he saw, I believe, that was the area that people were going to come from that were going to attack Israel. Not that the people that were there then, we have to track them all over the world. That's impossible. He was looking at a geographic thing. There's a lot in Bible prophecy. Some guys believe a migration theory. So like if the people that lived in Turkey migrated to the area of Germany, then you should look at Germany as being the problem in the end. And I just don't think that's the way it works. But we'll see. But it certainly appears that we're at the point right now where the geographic region is coming together. Then the next day, he gave another speech, and he said, this is the one I played last week at a party thing, and they're saying, Mr. President, Chief, they call him, this kind of interesting language, Chief, which is used in Ezekiel 38, Rosh, Chief. And people say, well, that's Russia. May or may not be. I'm open to any arguments here. But Chief, take us to Jerusalem. And he replied, patience brings victory. And this person said, Jewish apocalyptic. Because this has a big implications for Israel. And Erdogan has been very, very patient the way he has put this together. And those of us who have been watching for a long time are saying, wow, he's really serious about this. And even though his economy's been in the tank, even though there was a coup back in 2016 that Russia kind of helped him put down, he's hung in there. I think he runs for president again in the next year or two. And somehow I just think that he's going to be able to control the election process. So here's another tweet. And you see this is somebody who's a follower of Erdogan. And they put out this thing, and what's the picture of? The crescent moon over Jerusalem. Islam over Jerusalem. That's the important thing. And Erdogan is involved in he's really involved in rebel groups and terrorism that takes place in Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem. He's heavily involved in that. It's your turn, Jerusalem Sharif. We have a dream, Chief. Grant it, O Lord. That's what the tweet says. So understand, there's a geopolitical and a religious element to all of this. Now, one of the guys that's in his coalition also gave a speech last week, and in essence, he said, listen, Omar, Saladin, and Sultan Selim all conquered Damascus before they conquered Jerusalem. And later in that speech, he said, if Damascus has fallen, the fall of Jerusalem is imminent. The direct quote from his speech. So understand, this is Turkey. They've got, as President Trump said, they've got a very powerful army and military. Outside of the United States, it's the largest military force in NATO. They are a world leader in drone technology and manufacture, which is a big deal today. Now, Wednesday, Erdogan's son is going to lead a march in Istanbul on the Galata Bridge. They did one a year ago. And you see the poster for this, Galata Bridge, that's what it says down here. And it says, the sun rises. So what do you see rising? The Turkish-Palestinian flag. And then you see the minaret. On the left, you see Hagia Sophia. You see the minaret in the middle, and then you see the Dome of the Rock on the right. This imagery is very important. So up the top, it says, I won't try, my Turkish is very, very bad. But what it says is that Hagia Sophia first, then the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, and then Al-Aqsa. That's the progression. And so this is the rally that's going to take place in Turkey this next week. They've called for participation in a demonstration to protest the ongoing massacre in Palestine. A sun rises, that's what it's called. It's the Islamic sun, the sun of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. And so they say, we're going to Hagia Sophia first. What is Hagia Sophia? It is the largest church ever built in Christianity. It's in Istanbul. It was taken over and turned into a mosque, and then Ataturk turned it into a museum 100 years ago, and then Erdogan a few years ago went in there and turned it back into a mosque. And so there you see these Christian imagery, but you see these big discs that have parts of the Quran on them hanging in this church. And it's a mosque. Erdogan refers to it as a mosque. So they've already accomplished that. First, Hagia Sophia. Then we're going to do the mosque in Damascus. That's the Mosul part of this is the Ottoman Empire at its greatest extent. By the way, some people think that it looks like a leopard. We can argue about that. The Umayyad Caliphate that predated the Ottoman Empire, its main mosque is in Damascus today. And so you'll see pictures and videos of the jihadis that are taking over Damascus and Syria going to the mosque. Al-Jilani went to the mosque almost immediately and spoke, because the Umayyad mosque is very, very important in Islam. So they've taken over, you understand the imagery, they've taken over the biggest church in Christendom and turned it into a mosque. Now the mosque has fallen in Damascus. Damascus has fallen to Turkish-backed rebels. And then the next step is what? Jerusalem. Do you see the progression? And it begins to sound very much like stages of the things we read about in Bible prophecy. We know that all nations will gather together against Israel. They'll be led by people like an Erdogan. I'm not saying it is Erdogan, but it could be Erdogan, depending on how quickly these things unfold. And one person this week, who was that? Said, listen, watch Erdogan. Particularly if Erdogan goes to the mosque in Damascus, that will be sending a huge message as to his intentions relative to Jerusalem, because his son is leading this protest, that says Hagia Sophia first, the mosque in Damascus next, and the Temple Mount in Israel is also on our agenda. So here's somebody else who did a Photoshop. I saw this morning, so I'd already made mine up before that with the fez and everything. But this says the French newspaper L'Express wrote that Erdogan is the most dangerous Turk since Mehmet the Conqueror and Suleiman the Magnificent. They may have tried to criticize him, but this is the biggest compliment he could have received from his voter base. And remember, this was the thing he posted after Trump said, I'm moving the embassy of the United States to Jerusalem. Then it was all these things in the Turkish papers about, we got to protect Jerusalem. We'll have a big Islamic country meeting. And he put up this thing, which is like the Ezekiel 38 map, pretty well done, coming against Israel. This is very prophetic significantly. So he is, I think, controlling Al-Jilani. He knows exactly what he's doing. Al-Jilani has had an extreme makeover over the last couple of months. And so this is what, so the 3 stars, that's the HTS symbol and flag. They're taking over Syria. Jonathan Spire says this appears to indicate that Ankara is set on a 2-sided strategy in order to unify Syria under the rule of its Sunni Islamist clients. In this strategy, the threat of possible military intervention by Turkey will be maintained, while the SDF will be expected in the shadow of this threat to declare voluntarily its own dissolution before the rulers of the new unified Syria. The SDF is the Kurdish-backed forces in northeast Syria, where there are a couple thousand troops. So you can see the Turks are moving in, and what Erdogan wants is he wants the Kurds to surrender and leave. He doesn't want them around. He wants to take over Syria. He thinks he's entitled to it. Now, Trump says, I don't want our troops there, but Jonathan Spire says this: for as long as roughly 2,000 U.S. service personnel remain in eastern Syria, however, an all-out assault by Turkey remains an impossibility. The SNA by itself, meanwhile, appears not strong enough to make decisive advances against the SDF, so the stance of the U.S. will be crucial. The U.S. troops could block that. So go to Jerusalem Post last Friday and get this. Jonathan Spire concludes with this, just 3 sentences. From Israel's point of view, the victory of Turkey in Syria ushers in a resurgence of Sunni political Islam on its borders. Also likely is a period of open competition between Israel and Turkey, with the latter in alliance with various Sunni Islamist forces, including those in the West Bank and Gaza. Therefore, the interest is to keep the newly dominant forces as far away from Israel communities as possible and as militarily weak as possible, and to strengthen and preserve those elements resistant to the Turkish Sunni Islamist project. That's why Israel's occupying part of the Golan Heights, a buffer zone. That's why they've taken out Hezbollah. That's why they've destroyed the former Syrian military capability. They've just obliterated it. Last sentence from Jonathan's article. This explains Jerusalem's current support for the Syrian Kurds and Israeli recent military moves. As an SNA Turkish victory in northeast Syria and a reunited resurgent Syria under Turkish and Sunni Islamist control will constitute net losses for Israel in this new emergent competition. And so you'll see, so they're being very clever with the way they've remade this guy. And everybody in the world has been running to Syria to meet with this guy. Qatar, Egypt, other Gulf Arab states. Jerusalem Post headline, regional leaders flock to Damascus to discuss the future. And they're giving this appearance, we're moderate, we want peace with everybody, but then who do they appoint to these things? Here's a guy, Syria's new government appoints former al-Qaeda commander as the national intelligence head. But he's a moderate, The Damascus governor, appointed by al-Jilani, said, well, we want cordial ties with Israel, and that was reported by NPR here in the United States. But then this is the governor getting on and saying, I never called for peace with Israel, and it's not my prerogative at all. I spoke of in the context of internal coexistence and civil peace. And then this guy is the son of Yusuf al-Qadawi, and he said, listen, in this video, he threatens the Zionist-affiliated states in the region, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, and says they will be eradicated by Operation Levant Flood, which will be an extension of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, which was the October 7th massacre in the Hamas war against Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood still wants to take power in every Sunni state in the region. This is not going to go away quickly, and I do think that this is prophetic. And so you see these pictures of, I wish I had the video. This is the foreign minister from Turkey, who used to be the head of the intelligence services in Turkey. He's now the foreign minister, and he came and met with al-Jilani this week, and there's this video of them getting together. They're shaking hands and they're smiling. And I was thinking, you could put up, those balloon captions as to what they're thinking, like, man, I can't believe we got away with this. Everybody's believing that we're moderate and we're taking over this place and we're going to be peaceful. But really it comes down to, this is Caroline Glick's article, The Battle for Jerusalem. Go to JNS and read this. It's everything is very dicey. I know that Israel's had a lot of success, but what happened And this is the way the Iranian newspapers, a settler was fatally stabbed in Herzliya, 83 years old, a Holocaust survivor, stabbed on the street and killed. The Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar said that this attack was beyond human comprehension. And he's right. It's a terrible thing that happened. At the same time that all this, and I'm pretty much done, I got 2 more things to cover. This is Tehran Times the other day. Western pressure drives who closer? Iran and Russia. So in January, Iran and Russia will sign a big agreement to extend their cooperation agreement that they signed a couple years ago. There was a good, but I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes, there was a good article on a good segment on 60 Minutes last week about the pager, the Operation Grim Beeper, as they've been calling it. And it's interesting, Financial Times interviewed all the intelligence chiefs, like, what did you think of this? And all the intelligence chiefs of the West, countries like the UK and the United States, Leon Panetta, former head of the CIA, said, well, boy, it was a pretty risky operation. I don't know that we would have tried it. And they do conclude, though, it's like, well, but we don't live in the same neighborhood as Israel, and maybe Israel has more reasons to act than we do. And then this other article they're talking about here, the birth of a new world order. So at the end of the year, people are looking forward and they're saying, okay, Xi's in trouble, Trump's coming into office, Trump's making threats, Xi's making threats, what's going to happen? Are we going to have a new world order? And they're putting together this thing called BRICS. And these countries seem to be Russia, Iran, and Turkey seem to be developing alliances, although they don't get along on everything. So I think we're going to see some clashes of empires here as we move forward. I think these are prophesied in Daniel and elsewhere. It'll be an interesting thing to watch. And then one last thing. So Russia leaves Syria. And what are some of the other parts we've talked about Ezekiel 38 that need to come together? Libya, Sudan. I've already said to you how Erdogan is interested and active in those areas. Russia takes its military equipment, puts it on ships to get it back to Russia. Their navy is not that good. Their submarines are great, but their navy is not that good. One ship had a fire explosion in its engine room and sank somewhere in the Mediterranean or Atlantic on its way back with this equipment. But so Russia came up with an alternative plan. We'll take everything to Libya, which is kind of, I think, significant that they want to establish a foothold, a beachhead in Libya. Turkey wants it. Russia wants it. Russia's been active in Sudan. And so you're seeing this alliance come together. So it'll be interesting things to watch. So I know it's earlier than usual, but I'm going to quit. So I'll be on, so we have the Proxy Roundtable on January the 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern. That'll stream live on SBC's social media platforms. And I think Brit Gillette usually streams it, some other people too. I might stream it on their platforms. And I think Thursday, the plan is for me to be on Stand Up for the Truth, 290 FM in Wisconsin. That's 10 a.m. Eastern. And I'm sure we'll talk about what's going on. What happened in 2024 and what do we think is going to happen in 25? And yeah, we're going to cover all of that in 57 minutes. I don't think there's much chance of that. But pay attention. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff going on. So let's pray and we'll leave. Lord, thanks for your word. Thanks for telling us about these things in advance so that we could make sense of the times in which we live. Lord, I just pray you'll give us the strength, fill us with your Holy Spirit, and help us to stand firm in an evil day, and also to give us understanding about the things that are going on so that we can warn others and also use that as an opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. Pray that you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.